How to build a YouTube subscriber counter with an ESP8266 and any number of displays to show the data. Here's the ESP8266 module on a NodeMCU dev board format, going to USB for power. This is powering up, automatically joining the Wi-Fi network and polling the YouTube API once per minute. Then I'm sending it out optionally over serial to USB and or the I2C to these displays. Later I'll put better displays, but this is just to get the whole circuit working. So I just have the one I2C bus coming out to the OLED display reporting the statistics, and I'm powering the OLED from 3.3 volts, and I have I2C pull-ups to 3.3 volts. I'm also using the same I2C to drive the 16 by 2 line LCD, and the serial interface, PCF8574, I'm powering this from 5 volts because the LCD needs 5 volts, so I need these data lines to be 5 volts as well. And in order to get my 3.3 volt I2C to work on a 5 volt I2C, I'm using a level shifter. This whole circuit right here for the LCD doesn't need to be this complicated. I just don't happen to have one of the LCDs with a built-in backpack to do this same exact circuit. So this is all set up just for demonstration purposes, and we can send this data out to whatever kind of display we want. The purpose here is to just get the wireless and YouTube interface working. Looking at the example sketch called Channel Statistics from the YouTube API ESP8266, in order to get this working, we need a few things. We need to make sure we have the YouTube API library installed, the ESP8266 board files, Arduino JSON, which is used by the YouTube API. We're going to need our wireless network name and password. We're going to need the YouTube API data key, and we're going to need the channel ID for the YouTube channel we want to get info for. Once we have all of that, we basically create a secure Wi-Fi client and associate the YouTube API with it. We set up the delay we want between going out and getting the info from the API. 60,000 milliseconds is 60 seconds or 1 minute between requests. In the setup routine, we join the network and print out the IP if we are successful. Then we go in the loop, check if our 60 seconds has passed yet, and if so, go and try to get the YouTube channel with the API printed out on the serial monitor. Then update our time-lapse counter so we'll know when another 60 seconds has passed. So the subscriber count is what we are interested in, and this is in the API called channelstats.subscriberCount. In order to use the NodeMCU ESP8266 module with Arduino, if you haven't already set up the Arduino environment to use it, over here on GitHub they have the instructions. When you have the Arduino IDE open, you go to the Preferences window, and down in the Additional Board Manager URL section, you copy in this link. And if you have already something in there, and you need to add this, you can separate with commas. And this allows us to go into the board manager of the Arduino environment and install ESP8266. So over in the Tools menu and where we would choose what board we're using, the Boards Manager is up at the top of that list. And if we search for ESP8266, we'll find this and we can install it. Now notice I have version 2.4.2 installed right now. There are newer ones, but they are beta. What I've learned through this project, don't install beta anything. No beta board files in the board manager, and no beta libraries, because they can be, and in this case they were, buggy, and they cause the YouTube API not to work. Install the most current non-beta as a best guess at something that will work. We also need some things to use with this YouTube API library. To get the YouTube channel ID, just go to your channel on YouTube, and even if you're using a custom URL like this, once you get to your channel, just click on any link, like the home link. So this string of characters right here is going to be your channel ID that you would put in the sketch. You'll need a Google Apps API key. And that's what allows the ESP8266 over Wi-Fi to go in and retrieve channel statistics. So if you don't already have a YouTube API key, you go over and get it by going to this link, which is console.developers.google.com, and you sign in with your Google account. Once you're into this API dashboard, in my case, I currently don't have a project set up, so I need to create one, and it can be called whatever you want. I'm just going to use the default. After a couple of seconds, get started by enabling APIs and services. So it'll eventually refresh the list of APIs. Sometimes this takes a long time, and sometimes it seems to really stall here, and it seems to be when I don't have any projects currently set up. So one thing that seems to have worked before, if I just refresh the browser instead of sitting here, and magically now it loads. So now that we have our list of APIs available to us, we want to choose YouTube Data API v3. We want to enable. And now the next thing is we need to create credentials. So I clicked on credentials over here, and I will create credential. If you wish to skip all of this, just click to create API key for now, give it whatever name, and create. So here's the API key that we can now use. You'll want to keep the key private, so if you put it in a sketch and you want to give that sketch out, delete the key, maybe put a bunch of X's in there instead. But there's another thing I noticed that I wanted to point out. If we go back to the YouTube Data API and Manage, if we go to Quotas, along with making sure that we don't use beta versions of board files or library files in Arduino, because those prevented me from using this API, once I sorted all that out, at one point I had it working, but then throughout the day it stopped working again. And this is the reason, as it turns out. There's daily access quota limits. Mine is 10,000. Every time we access this from Arduino to get the channel statistics, it takes 3 of these 10,000 quota points. So if I'm polling once per minute, I'm actually using up 3 out of my 10,000 points per minute. So setting it for 1-minute intervals should be okay, but when I was experimenting and I was constantly rebooting and polling this YouTube API, I ran out of my 10,000 units. Another thing here, once we've done all of this to get the API key, you can check if your API key is working just by using a web browser. Using this exact link for the Google APIs, but substituting ID with our YouTube channel ID and key is our YouTube API key that we just made. We update those two parts, but bring this into a browser. If it's successful, it'll give us a report similar to this. And so you can see all the info, including the subscriber count. So that's how we know the key should work in our sketch. I'm going to put my info in here and run the sketch and see what happens. Okay, I temporarily put my info in and now it's uploading. So now it's running, it says it's connecting, and it connected. There's the IP address, and a minute passed, so it showed me 960 subscribers, etc. And now it'll do it again in another 60 seconds. Expanding on the example sketch for accessing the YouTube channel data, just to get it up and running with some sort of display, I've added an OLED and a 16 by 2 line LCD. I've taken this code from previous projects I've done, I'll link below. So I've added in the necessary parts of the OLED and LCD code in order to allow me to print out the YouTube data on those screens as well as the serial monitor. So I set up the OLED and LCD. I'll need to copy in my API, YouTube channel ID, and network info again. Then, like before, I'm just setting up YouTube with the wireless client, and upon power up, I want to send a message to both screens saying that I'm trying to join Wi-Fi. Same as before, wait until I'm connected to Wi-Fi, and when I'm joined, print on the serial monitor and on the two screens what my IP address is. What I've done differently this time, to ensure that I actually go in right away and get some YouTube channel statistics instead of having to wait for whatever my time delay is, I created a routine to go out and pull the YouTube API and get the data, So I'm calling this at the end of my setup routine so that it will run right away. And on my displays, I'm going to have my subscriber info right away. Then it will start polling every delay period. Otherwise, if I didn't do this, when I first power up, it might be sitting there for a while just showing my Wi-Fi IP until the minimum time period where it goes in and checks the channel data. And then in the main loop, just like in the example sketch, when the time period has lapsed, again go in and poll for the channel statistics and update the screen. I'm going to power it up now. So it's showing that it's trying to connect to the network, it's connected successfully, and immediately it's gone in and retrieved the channel statistics, and it's showing the info. And now after a minute, as usual, it's polling and showing again. That's how to get a YouTube subscriber count up and running using an ESP8266 on Arduino, and an example of how to get that information out on a display. In the future, I'll add a bigger and better display, but for now, the system is all debugged and ready to go.